Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Ask the Doctor. Tonight we are dealing with the Magnificent Seven for optimal health and energy. I'm all ears for all of this. The man of the hour teaches, trains, and lectures doctors all over the world. He is brilliant when it comes to health. If you have questions, definitely put them in the chat because we'll have a chance to enter them in there after he tells us all about these wonderful topics this evening. Without further ado, the amazing Dr. Bob Rakowski.
Well, happy, beautiful, amazing evening, all. Absolutely one of my favorite topics. I actually had a Zoom earlier today with England and basically Europe and Africa, and even Australia was on it. And Pete Cohen was asking me questions about the Magnificent Seven. When I met him more than a decade ago, his wife had brain cancer and wasn't given long to live. And we had a conversation, how do people get out of balance? How does illness start in the body? And he actually asked me that question. I said, you know what? I really think it comes down to not honoring our body, mind, and spirit with our choices. I was at a conference years ago and a world champion, multiple world champion, time world champion athlete was giving the keynote address. And then someone asked him, they said, how in the world do you have so much energy? And his statement was very, very powerful. He said, the only way you have energy is to earn energy. And I say the same thing with health. So the only way to have health is to earn health. And I call them the Magnificent Seven. You've got to eat right, drink right, think right, move right, sleep right, poop right, talk right, every single day. And by the way, I'm learning this new keynote software. Heloisa has done a great job creating these graphics. So I'll share them with you, but quite simply, when we start looking at our health, it's an investment that we absolutely want to make. And we'll start with eating right. And I have a fairly simple quote. I attribute it to Jack LaLanne because that's where I first heard it. If God made it, it's okay. If man made it, stay away. And then we look at what's going on around the globe. And malnutrition is absolutely the number one cause of death that has been for decades in a row, certainly the leading cause of death in 2020. Every country on planet Earth is affected by malnutrition. The good news is there's fewer and fewer starving children, but there's an absolutely increasingly starved population. And so it's simple math. We know that there are over 30 elements required to create healthy plants, animals, and humans. But scientists or farmers, or maybe the combination of both, found that you could actually grow a big plant with only 3 elements: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So when we look, if you pull 30 out for any 3 that you put back in, eventually you're going to have a problem. And so this is actually from CIA.gov, and they talk about the rapid depletion of non-renewable mineral resources and how it's causing problems throughout the globe. US Department of Agriculture, it takes 1,000 years to grow an inch of topsoil, and yet it's estimated that in the last 60 years, we've depleted about 60 inches. So I was giving a talk at a conference in Orlando, Florida about 20 years ago. Barry Sears was one of the keynote speakers, and he was presenting his book called The Zone. And at the time, he put up a copy of This Food Pyramid, which was the government eating guidelines for the US at the time. And his statement sticks with me so powerfully today. He said, if ever there was a terrorist-like plot designed to destroy the health of the world, this would be it. So I created my own nutrition pyramid back then. At the base of it's food, God's food, right? Nature's food. If God made it, it's okay. If man made it, stay away. Then I also recommend literally for everybody, and it's different quantities for different people, but to dot the I's, cross the T's, good food, great superfoods, functional foods, a good multivitamin, multimineral, activated omega-3s, probiotics, and a combination of D3, K2. Michael Pollan wrote a book called In Defense of Food, and he was very famous for creating a simple nutrition guideline: eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And here's what I tell people: eat real food, eat clean food, not too much, not too often, every color, every day, in a way that honors your genetics, your physiology, and your body goals, mostly plants. So think about it. God made real food. God made clean food. Man actually intoxicated it. What about not too much? Basically, calorie restriction increases longevity of every animal species tested, and intermittent fasting, very, very similar. By the way, I'm a big fan of functional food shakes. This is a shake that tastes like liquid birthday cake. That's phenomenal at melting off the fat. It's got the superfood whey in it and the superfood Ganoderma lucidum. And I happen to like this picture of Frank. He lost 100 pounds in 10 months. When it comes to drinking right, a lot of us probably know that our earth is mostly water, about 2/3. Our body is mostly water, about 2/3. And by the way, about 2/3 of that water should be inside of our cells. So I borrowed this title from a TED Talk by Dr. Daniel Amen. His talk was entitled What I Learned After 83,000 Brain Scans. Well, this is what I learned after over 10,000 hydration tests, and that is that most people are dehydrated. Now, I don't mean to the point where they're going to die, but certainly to the point where they are suboptimal. So if we think about it, when the sperm and the egg meet, that's nearly 100% water. And with each passing decade, we get less and less and less water. And I tell people if we live long enough, we'll ultimately become prune-life. So this is a very nice cutaway of a 3D model of a cell, and you see all the water on the inside of the cell. But here's what we know. Water will cross across different cell membranes as it follows particles. And so this is a picture from a very old biochemistry text, but it just tells it so effectively. Water will follow nutrients into the cell, or it will follow toxins outside of the cell. So we want to have the right balance of nutrients and toxins to have the right balance of water. And by the way, when people consume coffee, and the world does, tune of over 2 billion cups a day, water that has good nutrition in it that helps the body, or sorry, coffee that has good nutrition in it that helps the body to nourish and detoxify, which Ganoderma coffee does, then people move their body in a beautiful direction. When it comes to thinking right, sometimes I'll quote Yogi Berra when he made the statement, baseball is 90% mental, the other half is physical. Well, there's plenty of people that are saying that life is about 90% mental. It's what your thoughts make of it. And for most people, thoughts precede actions, precede results. So we probably want to find ways to think better and think right. The brain is what we think with, but keep in mind, the brain is not the mind. That's a pretty amazing epiphany there. But mental health and brain health are very, very similar. And there are several 100,000 studies talking about how the brain is the most nutrient dependent, energy dependent, stress vulnerable, and toxin vulnerable system in the body. And so we call it out with these different PubMed searches. And by the way, when I teach doctors want to know, what does the medical literature say about it? Well, pretty easy to see that it says a lot about the brain and nutrition, the brain and toxins, the brain and stress, and certainly the brain and energy. And again, when we start talking about a nutrition pyramid, everything counts. But one of my favorites, Ganoderma, is profoundly good for the brain, for the neurotransmitters, for the brain health, prevents Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, seizures, etc. So this is Daniel Amen. And here's what he found out through studying brains for decades. You can change people's brains, and you change it with healthier choices. So pretty interesting graphic here of the brain on stress. We know at rest, the brain gets more blood flow per unit volume than any organ, but under stress, fight or flight, it's going to shut off higher level thought processes. It's going to shut off joy, and people basically run on reflex activity. And when we start looking at chronic stress, they've now defined in the medical literature that nearly everybody has too much chronic stress. And it's really bad for their brain, their body, and their immune system. So for well over a decade, I've talked about a stress reset with melatonin, theanine, Ganoderma spores every waking hour. By the way, when I Zoom this afternoon, there are some countries where melatonin, this beautiful, safe, healthy, anti-cancer nourishing molecule, is restricted. And they asked, do you have a substitute? Well, melatonin is the best, but maybe something like 5-hydroxytryptophan which can become melatonin, would be another option. When we look at people and their relationship to their brain, before the age of 55, people are most concerned about cancer, and probably for good reason. You know, we live in a very stressed, toxic, malnourished, acidified world that's promoting cancer. But after 55, they're worried about outliving their brain. So I'm a huge fan of a technology called NeuroTracker. It's been around for over 20 years, over 50 published studies. This year, I'm going to do over 500 NeuroTracker sessions, and my brain is nearly 70% better at that training. And I got to tell you, it spills over into every area of life. And fascinatingly enough, it's just a game where you follow multiple objects in 3D space. It becomes 3D space because you put 3D glasses on. Previously, this was available only in high-level medical clinics for $100 a session, but now there's a consumer version available. If you don't know about NeuroTracker, you know, whoever referred you to this Zoom or replay, ask them. I like sharing the story of Donna Mae. I was giving a health talk and I was sharing this foot, which if you've seen me talk before, it's one of my favorite cases. But this woman was scheduled to have that foot amputated 2 days from the day that picture was taken. But look at it 2 weeks later and ultimately 17 months later. And what I tell people is that bodies respond to frequency, duration, intensity, quality, and timing of stimuli. So this woman already had one leg amputated due to diabetes, and the second leg was being threatened. And someone said, look, do you think this would help? That being Ganoderma, coffee, and tea. And my statement was pretty much always the same. I don't know if it'll help, but it sure won't hurt. Well, literally, she resolved the wound on the foot fairly quick, but her memory started coming back. And in 3 months, the doctors said both her diabetes and her dementia were in remission. So how wonderful that she actually got a couple extra years with her family. When it comes to moving right, certainly we should know that life is motion. If you move better, you live better. I personally like whole body exercise, every joint, every range of motion, every day. And that dancer there is beyond elite. Probably it's be hard to imagine anybody on this Zoom could do that with that amount of grace. Maybe somebody can, but we can all move every joint, every range of motion, every day as good as we can. And a few of my biohacks for fitness. The Wingate cycle test has been around for, I think, about 50 years. And they would put athletes on a bike, they'd have them warm up, and then they'd pedal all out for 30 seconds as a test of their anaerobic power. Well, this reporter said, you know what, that seems like by itself a pretty significant strain and maybe even a good workout. I wonder what would happen to my body and my health if I did that every day and just that for 30 days. Well, amazing improvements in body composition, health, and fitness. So it doesn't take an hour multiple times a week, just a few minutes a day can work. And one of my favorites is the Tabata. And that is basically 20 seconds of all-out effort, followed by 10 seconds recovery, 8 back-to-back rounds, and a great way to get fit. So we've been through eat right, drink right, think right, move right. Now we're on sleep right. And, you know, one of the things that's certainly true of me is that a great day starts the night before. And Anders Ericsson studied the best of the best in all fields, whether it was talking business, athletics, music, teaching, academics, whatever. The best of the best would sleep 8.6 hours a night. And over that period of time, there's a lot of healing and cleansing that happens in the brain and the body. So my favorite superfood, Ganoderma, when people consume it, they fall asleep, sleep deeper, longer, fall asleep faster, and wake up more refreshed. I really get a kick out of this picture for Poop Right. And Poop Right is really eliminate right. It's not just the bowels, it's the kidneys, it's the liver, it's the lungs, it's the sweat, it's the lymphatic system. But some interesting stats. If we go back 120 years, the average life expectancy in 1900 in the US was 47.3. This graph goes out to 2009 and it went up to 78.2. In 1900, 80% of people died of infectious disease. But notice that that dropped to less than 10% by 1950 something. And there was a 75% reduction in death rate from infectious disease before antibiotics and over 90% before widespread vaccines. and essentially none since then. So what created the longevity? Well, improved sanitation and hygiene. So this was New York City in 1881. The major mode of transportation was the horse and buggy. And that was 2.5 million pounds of horse manure in the streets every single day. So when you look at it, certainly sanitation and hygiene have increased longevity. And here's the question I ask to my doctors, my students, et cetera, and patients. If cleaning up the external environment led to such a dramatic increase in longevity, what will happen when we clean up the internal environment? And what I can tell you is that people get better. So the symptoms of chronic poisoning, fatigue, sleep disturbance, intestinal distress, allergy symptoms, headaches, confusion, and anxiety. And by the way, if we got rid of these symptoms, I might have to do something else for a living. So detox is something I consistently promote. And Ganoderma lucidum is phenomenal, safe, and effective at clearing out some of the worst toxins in the history of the planet. So we'll wrap up on talk right. Here's what I tell people. Every cell in the body is potentially in communication with every other cell. And part of the reason I use this book cover here is this guy's a Navy SEAL trainer. And one of the things he'll tell them is that your self-talk and your team talk is absolutely critical. And so keep in mind, our cells talk to themselves. That's what autocrine signaling is. They talk to their neighbors. That's what paracrine signaling is. And then the whole body can communicate with everything else. And that's what we think about when we think about endocrine signaling. So if I were at a live seminar and we might have 200 doctors in the audience, I would look out at the audience. I'd say, as we're here, I realize that, everybody respects each other's space, right? Nobody's sitting on anybody's lap. When it comes time for lunch, we respect each other's food. We don't steal their food. And for sure, when we need to use the restroom, we get up, we excuse ourselves, we go to a different room, and we don't bother anybody. Well, cancer cells don't behave that. They crowd other cells' space, they steal their food, and then they poop and they pee all over them. And what's been said is the very first step in cancer is a loss of cell-to-cell communication and even contact inhibition. So keep in mind, these are fighters in a very serious stare down. But most of the time, we don't want to get that close to anybody, So, there's a specific violation of people's space. And I guess you're going to do that when you're fighting, but we don't want our cells violating each other's space. So one of the principles of all of communication is that it requires good signaling, which is pH dependent. So every hormone, every enzyme in the body is pH dependent. And the number one acid and toxin in the body is actually acid. So I read this book years ago, Alkalize or Die, and it makes a good point. If you keep accumulating acid, you'll ultimately die. I don't like the negative side of it, so I say alkalize and thrive. And this is something that we do very effectively with elite athletes. And, very simple graph of an Olympic speed, Olympic sprinter, and we see that he hits a peak speed at about 60 meters and then has a little bit of a decline. And if he kept going, he'd have more of a decline. So that's when he switches from stored ATP and something called creatine phosphate to what's known as anaerobic glycolysis, where he makes lactic acid. So I look at acid alkaline balance of everybody that I evaluate. And this was a fun story of Tyson Gay. We improved his acid alkaline balance. And, amazingly, he beat Usain Bolt straight up in the 100 meters. And you know what, is famous for it and signed a really nice big contract after that. And even medically, they know there are some extreme benefits of the alkaline diet. It's just not something that's promoted, I believe, as much as it should be in medicine. And it really should be a goal in all doctors' offices. Tangent to coffee real quick. Coffee has more than 30 different acids, but I'm an investor in a coffee that has a patented process that pulls the acid out of coffee and puts in an alkalizing superfood called Ganoderma lucidum, which is accepted as the most alkaline food on the planet. So to wrap it up, the only way to have health is to earn health. And we do that by eating right, drinking right, thinking right, moving right, sleeping right, pooping right, talking right. And that brings us to questions, if there are any.
Well, yes, there are. All right, let's get started with what do you recommend for someone who's been diagnosed with Meniere's disease?
So I'm gonna go for the fun of it and just go to etiology because I'm pretty sure that they suspect that that's an autoimmune disease. But let me share a screen and let me figure out where I'm going to go with that. Google Chrome. And that was Facebook Live. Let's add this. So I think you're seeing my screen. I'm going to type in Meniere's etiology. And I do this multiple times a week because so many people are being diagnosed with that. So what is the cause? What are the main causes? What virus causes Meniere's? That's interesting. So head injury, middle ear, allergies, alcohol, stress, medication, smoking, stress, or anxiety. All right, so that one's not considered autoimmune. So basically, here's what I tell people when I teach doctors all over the world. Anything that's eye, ears, nose, or throat is cranial until proven otherwise. So we can actually do some very gentle manipulation of the skull and get that fluid to drain out of the middle ear. We can kill an infection, we can buffer allergies, people can curtail their use of alcohol, the stress reset, the melatonin, theanine, Ganoderma spores. Certain medications, well, how about finding natural alternatives? How about quitting smoking? Stress reset and Ganoderma's anti-anxiety. So those are things that we could all do for Meniere's. And ultimately, if people are holding fluid in the middle ear, well, then we want to get that fluid to drain. And cranial manipulation is one of my favorite ways to do that. Are we all together? Carol, are you muted? I'm still, okay, there you are.
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay.
Next question is a popular one for you. What do you recommend for someone with endometriosis?
So I am a very visual person, so I'm going to explain through this, even though I don't have a female anatomy or pelvic cavity, right? But so I've got an abdominal cavity, and below my abdominal cavity is my pelvic cavity. And so if I were a female, I'd have this wonderful uterus, and then I'd have these ovaries with these things called, the uterus has what are known as fallopian tubes with these things called fimbriae. And when the ovary ovulates, it releases an egg, the fimbriae grabs it and it pulls it into the pelvic cavity. So there's an opening between the pelvic cavity and the abdominal cavity. So, part of the female amazing cycle is potentially every month their body prepares for implantation of a fertilized egg. And so we've talked about this before. Females in utero, my granddaughters, when they were in utero, they had something like 7 million eggs. And when they joined us on planet Earth here outside of the womb, something like 3 million eggs. And over time, those eggs go away. But when that uterine lining sloughs off, some of it goes backwards. That's called retrograde menstruation. So there's tissue, endometrial tissue, that gets into the abdominal cavity. So the term endometriosis, osis is an unusual condition of the endometrium, in this case, growing where it shouldn't in the abdominal cavity. So what should happen is very simply, the immune system should clear out that endometrial tissue where it's not supposed to be. So is the person creating more endometrial tissue? Is the endometrial tissue growing more than it should? And those things happen in an estrogen toxic circumstance. And by the way, if people don't have a good immune system, then it can grow out of position. So we've done full Zooms on endometriosis, and we've had near miracle type resolutions by helping the body process the estrogens. And that's done with a good diet, cruciferous vegetables, functional foods, Ganoderma spores, and even sometimes some proteolytic enzymes. So all those things can be good, but the estrogen toxicity is certainly something that we want to address, and then help the immune system clear out, the dissolved or the ectopic tissue, and even proteolytic enzymes can break it down.
Okay. What can you say about Ganoderma coffee helping with people who have mushroom allergies?
Well, we've certainly seen great success with it. And so I have a video that I created on that, and I'll send it to you, Carol, and you can put it in the chat. But someone might come up to me and they'd say, well, I have a milk allergy. And I'll ask them, what milk are you allergic to? Is it cow's milk, goat's milk, human milk, pig milk, killer whale milk, hamster milk? What kind of milk are you allergic to? And they say, well, I think it's cow's milk. Well, are you okay with goat's milk or sheep's milk? Well, if they tried it, they often realize they are, because everything is quite simply different. So there's an estimated 50,000 mushrooms on planet Earth, everyone with a different protein makeup. And Ganoderma is the mushroom that actually is a powerful allergy modulator. And so that's one that we know can work very, very well. But ultimately, people just need to try it, see what it does for them. And I think they'll be pleasantly surprised.
Perfect. What are some good brain foods to consume?
Well, I'm going to answer that a couple different ways. So understand that the brain is mostly water. So if we have high quality water, and keep in mind, fruits and vegetables are 90+% water, and it'd be alkaline water, it'd be good there. The primary structural component of the brain is fat, and the primary fat is DHA and omega-3, docosahexaenoic acid. And that's in cold water plants, and that's in cold water fish, and all of that's going to be important. But remember, the brain is the most nutrient dependent, energy dependent, stress vulnerable, toxin vulnerable system. So for the nutrients, you need all the fabulous 50. And that means you need good foods, clean foods, not too much, not too often, every color, every day, in a way that honors your physiology, your genetics, and your body goals, mostly plants. Ganoderma covers the fabulous 50. But then we start looking, and just quite simply, if God made it, it's okay. If man made it, stay away. We want to really optimize the water, optimize the fat, minimize the toxins, don't stress or inflame ourselves with our diet. And then we need a balance of all the nutrients, and especially the B's, for the energy component. So I didn't give you anything specific other than Ganoderma, but quite simply, good quality foods with good quality fats are really good for the brain.
Perfect. For someone dealing with depression, do you think that NeuroTracker would be helpful?
I have to see if there's a PubMed on that, because there might be. But my thought is that it should be. You make a better brain, and across the board, the brain can improve better. And so it's actually been said that you can't think a happy thought and be depressed at the same time. So I wonder if people, when they've trained their brain, if they could spend more time focusing on happy thoughts. So let's look at this. When I typed in NeuroTracker and depression, there's one PubMed study on it, or at least it hits that criteria. But let me see if it actually used the NeuroTracker. Well, it doesn't in the part of it where I looked at the details, it doesn't mention NeuroTracker specifically. So I'm not sure about that, but my gut feel is that it should be good. It should be helpful.
Okay. Do the beverages help with depression and anxiety?
Well, Ganoderma does. And so there's a number of PubMeds on those. So, the primary neurotransmitters of depression, serotonin and dopamine, Ganoderma is great for that. Primary neurotransmitters associated with anxiety are going to be GABA glutamate, too much glutamate, not enough GABA, and Ganoderma is good with that. So, and we have plenty of people with brain testimonials that have benefited. But, what I tell people is that everything matters. And one of the biggest challenges that depressed people have is they're not really motivated to take charge of their life, to get a good goal, to pursue something that would make them profoundly happy. And some people say that depression is the world's most debilitating condition. So I think it's really important to get good support groups and good support. And when I taught a neurology series with a neurologist from Cornell around the US in 2009, he said, look, if you go to a psychiatrist, there's 100% probability that you're going to get a prescription for a drug for whatever your mental circumstance is, because that's the way the world has moved. But reality is, again, you can't simultaneously have a happy thought and a depressed thought. So can we find ways to think happy thoughts, have happy goals, move our life in a happy direction? I believe we all can. And that's what we need to really be targeting to create a really good life.
Okay. Next question. Can you speak to Ganoderma and the benefit of children using the products?
Sure. We're finding out that children are somewhat born sick. And so there's an interesting study called the Pottinger cat study. You ought to be able to get it on YouTube. But this was done in the 1940s, and they decided to put cats on a nutrient-deprived diet, basically a processed diet. And what they found out is the first generation of cats became sicker earlier. So they started developing degenerative diseases, way ahead of the group that had the nourishing diet. Well, then the second generation of cats had very severe degenerative diseases early in life. So that would be like, juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, juvenile cancer, juvenile whatever. The third generation of cats was born sick. They came out of the womb with all kinds of challenges, and there was no fourth generation. The animals were too sick to reproduce. So many people, myself included, are saying that most kids born today are probably somewhere near that third generation of sick. And we start looking at infertility, it's rampant. There's been a decline in birth rate across the globe now for 5+ decades. And the numbers are something like 1 in 5 couples, trying to have a baby are having a hard time. So it's a problem. So we've got to nourish people, and kids need it more than any. So, we've had plenty of kids. We give them a hot chocolate, we give them spores sprinkled on their food. And their body just thanks them for it. It's so good, and kids are resilient enough that they can notice a difference pretty quick.
Perfect. What would you say Ganoderma coffee versus conventional coffee for taste and health benefit?
Well, we look at health benefits, and there's no comparison. You're talking about the best of the best versus most conventional coffee is just pure crap. It might have mycotoxins. It's not organic. It's extremely acid. But even with that said, coffee has lots of antioxidants. People that drink it consistently. Caffeine is a natural antimicrobial, and people live longer. In terms of taste, there's plenty of us that prefer the taste of organo coffee. And I think if you blend it right with the right amount of water and get the right blend for you, you'd find it tastes as good or better. And I tell the story, about the mocha. There's plenty of purists, and I wasn't going to sell any mochas until I realized that that's what, a lot of people are drinking. They're drinking latte, they're drinking mocha, they're drinking crap coffee with crap sweeteners, and they're ruining their bodies. When we switch them to ours, it's blood sugar friendly, and it helps them tremendously. So, no comparison. Ours is better across the board.
Thank you. Sorry about that, guys. I somehow managed to copy the wrong link, so the correct link is now in the chat. Yay. Does anybody else have any questions? Claudio, are you going to go live for me?
I am alive. Yes, happy, beautiful evening, everyone. Dr. Bob, can you touch on Bell's palsy? I'm not sure if I'm saying that correct.
You are.
Please.
Yep. So what happens with Bell's palsy is there's a problem with the facial nerve where the mouth falls open, the eye, it droops. It's a real problem. And, ultimately, it could be due to a trauma. It could be due to a toxin. It could be due to a virus. And, I've seen plenty of people where they get Bell's palsy. They go to the emergency room and they give them corticosteroids to control the inflammatory process. That's the standard of care. I think if we Googled it, it'd be standard of care corticosteroids for Bell's palsy. But if it's a virus, we have a problem because the corticosteroids suppress the immune system. And if they don't kill that virus can kill that nerve. And instead of being a temporary disruption, it becomes a permanent disfigurement. Now, in my clinical practice, I have not seen a single patient that we put on Ganoderma spores every waking hour where they didn't resolve the Bell's palsy. And I'll say that, but this year, I have an individual that actually had a Bell's palsy. We put it into remission. It started coming back. I said, something's not right. Let's order a brain scan. And it turns out he had brain cancer that was affecting that nerve. So the Bell's palsy was a good tell that, okay, we need to look a little deeper, and now he's under care for that. And so most commonly, it's going to be a virus, and you want to control the inflammation and support the immune system to get that to go away. And again, we've seen it happen really, really well. Now, I've had people reach out all over the organo world to me. One guy said, Dr. Bob, I woke up with Bell's palsy. What do? I said, 2 spores every waking hour, complete resolution in 7 days. So it can be quite powerful, but you got to make sure you get after it early. Don't let the virus kill the nerve.
Excellent. Well,
Thank you.
so far, Claudio has the last question. Does anybody have a, oh, Jeff's got a question to go for it.
Dr. Bob, you've been talking about neural tracker today. It reminded me of a question I have for you every time I'm not around you. Neural tracker, when you're about to go play, asks you how much sleep you had, asks you how you feel mentally, asks you something else, and then the last one is how hydrated or dehydrated do I feel? I don't know how do I know to scale that? How do I know that?
I don't know how anybody knows. I just skip it and go right to the balls on the screen, and so there's a period of time where I was answering those questions. I said, oh, for crying out loud, but at any rate, I just answer it. And, you're part of a database. And I think what they're looking for is for people that answer the question, how does their brain respond when they're not feeling ideally? And I think we know the answer. If you haven't had a good night's sleep, if you're not feeling well hydrated, if you're feeling overly stressed, your neural tracker score is probably going to be less. It's just that simple. And so they're just finding ways to track what's going on. But I'll tell you, it's a proven technology. And, if our brain really is a big part of what controls our life, and I believe it is, the more good things we do for our brain, the better. So I'm all in with that this year and having fun with it.
So then how do I, or let's change the question a bit. What would be a recommendation for me to ensure that I am properly hydrated?
Well, high water content fruits and vegetables every day should be the bulk of your diet. Lots of good, clean, fresh water, Ganoderma coffee, tea, etc. And the CXT is a phenomenal brain drink. So there's a test called bioelectrical impedance analysis that assesses hydration status. It actually approximates it, but it's technology been around for over 50 years. Diane Solano owns the unit, and maybe some other people she knows, but it might be a good idea to get a baseline on your hydration status and then proactively work to improve it. And here's what I can tell you. My patients that have the best hydration have the best physical health. Those that have the worst, they're in trouble.
Thank you very much, sir.
Perfect.
Hi, Dr. Bob. Sir, I don't know if you can hear me. Oh, can you hear me?
Go ahead. I can, loud and clear, yep.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to speak on the neuro tracker and the depression and all these other things. So with NeuroTracker, what it does is it helps increase neuroplasticity. So it's the way the brain changes and adapts to stuff like that. And there is a study, in fact, that talks about depression, how depression inhibits neuroplasticity, and how exercise restores it and kind of reduces the depressive symptoms. So if someone was to say, like, does it help depression? It's proven to. So just letting you know.
You know, I've been having a lot of fun studying the brain, and thank you for that. And ultimately, when people have something that they're excited about, something that they're pursuing, their life is pretty doggone good. And, you know, now here's the challenge. A lot of us have had different curveballs thrown at us, and you know, a lot of the people that I'm seeing on this screen, but ultimately, what do we need to do? I'll go back to Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He was being tortured in, you know, Nazi concentration camps, and his whole family was killed. And he said they could take everything from me except my ability to choose my thoughts and choose my attitude. And he saw himself making the world better because of that experience. And it fueled him to survive and thrive ultimately. So, you know, I asked the question, if someone can survive that environment and come out of it better for it, you know, can we all do it? And the answer is we all can. The next question is, will we? And, you know, I've been happy and less than happy. And I'll tell you what, I'll choose happy every time. And, you know, less than happy, well, I let things out of my control, whether it be death of a friend, a loved one, you know, different circumstances. Those are harsh, and it's okay to be sad. But ultimately, depressed, that's a different ballgame. That's you're sad for way longer than you need to be, and you haven't gotten yourself back on track, finding ways to add value to the world. And, you know, it's a sad part of life. We're all going to be sad sometime, but we can also be happy a big chunk of the time. And best way to be happy is to give happy. That's proven. So be grateful, add value, enjoy the process.
Perfect. We have a few more questions in the chat for you. Can these products help with weight loss? What do you recommend?
Well, they certainly can. And so there's a number of different fat loss mechanisms associated with it: insulin signaling, anti-inflammatory, stress buffering, satiety, microbiome management, et cetera. And so, you know, if we go through this picture, you look at the replay, Frank lost 100 pounds in 10 months drinking the shakes. And before that, we'd seen people lose 40, 50, 60 pounds just by switching their coffee. So some people can do that. So entirely possible. But you know, is everybody that consume it, are they going to lose weight? Is it going to melt off their body? No, weight loss is more complicated than that. And if you're stuck, you might want to reach out to a professional that understands weight loss. You know, medically, they might give amphetamines, they might butcher the digestive tract, and those have challenges. But, you know, I believe nearly everybody with the right program for them can get a much better body composition.
Perfect. What do you recommend for people to clear their skin from stress, acne, breakout?
Well, the stress reset, you know, you want to buffer yourself on the stress, you want to reset the stress and do those things. And then ultimately, there's different things in the microbiome, and I've been studying that as well this year. And there is a probiotic that's associated with non-cystic acne that has some pretty good research behind it. Since I've just been exposed to it, I'd be able to look that up in my office, but not from here now. But that is something that's absolutely out there.
What time of day do you do your NeuroTracker sessions?
You know, I haven't picked the most consistent time yet. So it's usually when I can fit it in, which might be afternoon. On a rare day, it might be after 5 p.m. And on a weekend, it might actually be in the morning. But I just absolutely make sure that I get it in. And I believe now I have 125 sessions in this year. So I'm on pace for my 500. But keep in mind, I didn't start until maybe the 7th of January. So I had some catch up to do. And sadly, I wasn't in the routine. I missed a few days, but I make sure that I make up for it. So now I'm in a good routine. So every day and most days too.
Excellent. Can you, Xavier and Devin, sorry, Xavius and Devin, Could you clarify the question for me?
I'm looking at that. Is the book Man's Search for Himself, Man's Search for Meaning?
Okay.
And Viktor Frankl is the author. So I'll go and share the screen. What screen do I share? I don't know why my computer still defaults to Chrome. I really want it to be DuckDuckGo, but Man's Search for Meaning, a book by Viktor Frankl. And then I'll go to the images. And I like this quote from him. Got to move that. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And those are words that are so powerful, especially the circumstances by which he wrote those.
Perfect. One more question so far. Could you go over what cystic acne is? I think is what that question is referred to be.
That's one where I'm not a dermatologist to be able to tell you what makes cystic acne, but it's deeper, it's more fluid, it's more bulky. And the probiotic that I've ordered for my office, I ordered it because there's data on it being helpful for acne, but specifically a clarified non-cystic acne. Now, I would think that if someone has acne, I'd want to clear up the digestive tract. I'd want to eat really clean. I'd want to detoxify. I'd want to hydrate. And then, a probiotic is probably a good idea in that circumstance. I might do it under any circumstance, even if I had cystic acne.
Perfect. Any more questions, my friends?
I'll throw another one in the chats. High insulin and sugar levels, will that have effect on your eyesight?
Well, it can. The number one cause of preventable blindness is diabetes. And they call it diabetic retinopathy, and there's other challenges that happen there. But, I literally just pulled up an article today. I was doing a consult with an individual out in California, and he's had blood sugar problems for years. We got it under control. And he decided, okay, I'm doing better now. And so he got off of his protocol. And now he's got a droopy eye. And so I'm going to share this screen because, we updated lab data on him. And, his sugar's out of control. He's back to out of control diabetic. So ptosis is a droopy eye. And this is the case report as the only manifestation of diabetic superior division oculomotor nerve palsy. Well, diabetes is really bad for the nerves. It can be really bad for the eye. In this case, it was a nerve that controlled eye function. And so, one of my great mentors said years ago, friends do not let friends become diabetic. The body is destroying itself from the inside out. And the damage, if you let it go too long, can be irreversible. And when I show the picture of that foot, I let people know, well, usually the first surgery, they amputate the foot here. Then they amputate it here. Then they amputate it here. Then they go to the other side. Then they keep cutting. I'm trying to figure out how to change my arms and make that look good on the screen. Then then you go blind, then your kidneys fail, then you die and you never have another good day. Friends do not let friends become diabetic. There's the simple answer. And it's wonderfully reversible. And I'm looking forward to the day where type 1 diabetes becomes routinely reversible. We know that Ganoderma in animal studies prevents type 1 diabetes. So keep that pancreas healthy, keep that sugar healthy.
They've asked, how can you inspire your friends not to be diabetic?
By example. So John Maxwell says this: a leader is one who knows the way, goes the way, shows the way. And ultimately, when we honor people where they are on their journey, I believe our life is a lot easier, even though it can be painful to watch people make choice after choice that puts them on a downward spiral. And so, love them always, and do your best to lead them to better choices. And sometimes it's education. Remember, people move by a few different criteria, inspiration or desperation. I think the question was inspiration. Be amazing. Have your own testimonial. Help people all over the world. Share with them. This person had diabetes. They were 40 pounds over fat. Look at them 6 months later, and all they did was change their coffee. And by the way, they're now able to take better care of their family. So those types of stories are inspiring. If it gets to become a desperate circumstance, well, people tend to move more to action when they're desperate, but why get there? Why not keep them happy, healthy, balanced, and move them in a positive direction? Doesn't matter where you are, you can always get better. Sad news is you can always get worse too. We don't want to get people to get so bad that worse seems, to be the end of them.
Prevention trumps cure. I'll never forget that line.
All right. On that note, Claudio, I think we can all say thank you to the man of the hour.
Good night, all. God bless.
Thank you, Dr. Bob.
Thank you, Dr. Bob.
Thanks, Dr. Bob.